Today is Saturday, September 28th. The arrival of fall means so-called sick season is right around the corner, when respiratory viruses like flu, COVID, and RSV tend to peak. So what can you expect this year? Today, we're talking with epidemiologist Dr. Caitlin Jetelina. You may know her from social media or her popular Substack newsletter, Your Local Epidemiologist. She also co-founded the Health Trust Initiative and is a senior scientific advisor to the CDC. Today, she's sharing insights about the type of flu season to expect, what to know about this year's vaccines and when to get them, and even new guidelines for parents. That and more coming up. Welcome to the Newsworthy Special Edition Saturday, when we sit down with a different expert or celebrity every Saturday to talk about something in the news. Don't forget to tune in every Monday through Friday for our regular episodes, where we provide all the day's news in 10 minutes. I'm Erica Mandy. It's now time for today's Special Edition Saturday. Dr. Caitlin Jetelina, thank you so much for joining us again on the Newsworthy.
Thank you for having me.
So first, let's talk about what's happening now. What are the current trends and what to expect next when it comes to both COVID and flu?
Flu and RSV season, general sick season is really around the corner. Interestingly, though, with COVID-19, it's incredibly high right now. We had a really big summer COVID-19 wave, and it just started peaking and started coming down.
And the COVID that we've seen recently, is that looking more severe or less severe than what we've seen in the past?
So the summer wave, let me clarify, was a massive wave of infections. The good news is, though, that we can continue to see a decoupling between severe disease and infection because of the immunity we continued to build with vaccines and infections. That doesn't mean no one went to the hospital. In fact, there were a number of people that were hospitalized, particularly those over 65 that are not up to date on their vaccines. That also doesn't mean that we're not losing lives still. COVID-19 is the 10th leading cause of death right now. So it's definitely still here, but we're not in the emergency we saw ourselves a year or two or three ago.
And we're not really seeing RSV and flu yet, but you said they're coming. What is the timing expected? And I know sometimes you've talked about you look at Australia to see what's happening there. Can you give us an update on that?
When we look at patterns in Australia or South America or New Zealand, we see that they had a pretty middle of the road season. There's also good news that the flu vaccine that we're getting this year is a good match to the circulating flu strains we saw in Australia, which means that it'll do a decent job of keeping us out of emergency departments, for example. And so we expect that that's going to kind of happen in the Northern Hemisphere. Of course, things can put us out for a surprise, but we are expecting fall respiratory season like we saw last year. And you're right. Right now, rates are pretty low. It's starting to heat up in the South. So like, for example, in Georgia. But that's typically how flu season starts. It starts in the South and then starts spreading across the nation.
And the FDA recently approved the newest COVID vaccine. Just to remind people why there are new versions every year, like really for both COVID and flu, and what is different about this year's COVID vaccine.
COVID and flu, we need annual shots, unlike, for example, the measles vaccine, where we just really need one. And that's because of many complicated reasons. But the main one is because flu and COVID mutate incredibly quickly. In fact, COVID mutates even 2 times faster than the flu. And so because of that, we need to keep updating our immune defense walls, keep patching those walls up. So FDA approved an updated formula for the COVID-19 vaccine as well as the flu vaccine.
How effective do you expect them to be?
With flu, we typically see around 50% effective against preventing emergency room departments or having to go to the urgent care. And with the COVID vaccine, we typically see that is about 20% effective against infection. Unfortunately, that wanes really quickly. So after about 3 months, doesn't do much in preventing infection. But what the COVID-19 vaccine and flu vaccine do very well is protect against severe disease and death.
So when do you recommend that people get their flu and COVID shots? Because I know with flu, it's sometimes you don't want to do it too early because it won't last as long into the end of flu season. What are your thoughts?
The best vaccine is the one you get when you can get it. So with flu, October is usually ideal. One reason is because we see flu later. RSV vaccines do not wane. In fact, they're very durable. And because of that, they're not annual vaccines. You actually just need one vaccine for now if you're over 65, for example. And so get that vaccine whenever. And then COVID is really tough. I think it ultimately comes down to convenience when you can get in. And I mean, the most ideal is getting it before a wave. The problem is we don't really know when that wave is going to happen. So I'm getting mine at the same time I get flu, around Halloween.
And for people who want to get it now, I mean, not everywhere has it just yet.
That's right. So even though the FDA has fully approved the vaccine, I mean, it takes time to manufacture vaccines and then distribute them, and or for physicians to put in orders. And so, yeah, it's going to take a few weeks for you to maybe go find a vaccine. One great tool that I love using just for my family is vaccines.gov. It has a really great search engine to see where the closest vaccines are for you.
Do we expect people to actually get these shots this year? And what did we see last year?
So last year we saw 1 in 4 Americans got the COVID-19 vaccine. 1 in 2 Americans got the flu vaccine. I estimate we're going to see about the same. There's two kind of competing interests that have happened, though, that'll be interesting to watch how it plays out with this season. One is Health and Human Services just put together, I think it's a $200 million campaign for fall vaccines, trying to reach and target those that need it the most, older adults, pregnant women, etc. Second competing interest, though, is that we just had a huge COVID wave. And honestly, you do not need a COVID-19 shot within 4 to 6 months of getting an infection. And so that will impact our COVID vaccine coverage.
And you mentioned people over 65 and pregnant women. Those are the people who really need these vaccines the most. Anybody else you want to add to that list?
I would say severely immunocompromised. So, for example, going through an organ transplant or has blood cancer, those we see that the vaccines are not very durable for them, and it's really important. We keep them protected. And I will say, we ran through the numbers. These vaccines are not perfect. So that means we also need a layered approach.
Meaning mask and other steps you can take.
Masks, staying at home when you're sick, using at-home antigen tests, getting the air flowing in your workspace or at home if you're having a holiday party. That can actually do a lot as well.
Still ahead, have you heard of the RSV shots? They just came out last year, but have been shown to be extremely effective. Dr. Caitlin Gentilina explains the 3, maybe 4 groups of people who should get the vaccine or the antibody treatment. We also discuss her perspective on when to test your kids for COVID still and when to keep them home from school. Plus, what's happening with the Mpox outbreak in Africa? And is it expected to spread to the U.S.? All that and more next. But first, a break for our sponsors. Are you planning a vacation for fall break or the upcoming holidays, but you're kind of dreading the cost? Well, with Ibotta, you can earn cash back on all your purchases, so you can spend more time making memories and less time just dreaming about them. Ibotta is a free app that lets you earn cash back every time you shop. You can save at your favorite grocery stores, Lowe's, Macy's, Sephora, Best Buy, and many more. Other apps give you points that don't amount to much, but with Ibotta, you earn cash back that you can withdraw to your bank account, PayPal, or gift cards. It's really easy to use. You simply add offers in the app, upload your receipt, and voila, the money is yours. It's time you join the over 50 million users who use Ibotta to earn cash back every time they shop. Right now, Ibotta is offering our listeners $5 just for trying Ibotta by using the code NEWSWORTHY when you register. Go to the App Store or Google Play Store and download the free Ibotta app to start earning cash back and use the code NEWSWORTHY. That's IBOTTA in the Google Play or App Store and use that code NEWSWORTHY. The Newsworthy is also brought to you by SKIMS. The SKIMS Soft Lounge Collection truly lives up to its name. It is so soft. Every time I get an item in the mail, I pull it out of the bag and I am immediately impressed by the feel of the fabric. Whether it's my SKIMS Soft Lounge long slip dress, the Soft Lounge tank, or the sleep set, I immediately want to put it on and wear it all day long. And often I do, because a lot of the collection can also be worn out of the house. I recently got the Soft Lounge tank paired with the fold-over pant, and it's great because I can wear it lounging around the house, running errands, or dropping my kiddo off at school, and then come back home for a Zoom call. And I'm both comfortable and feel stylish at the same time. In fact, I love having matching sets on hand, like that set or my Soft Lounge sleep set. It's something so simple, but it really just makes me feel put together with very little effort. Shop the SKIMS Soft Lounge Collection at skims.com. Now available in sizes extra, extra small to 4X. If you haven't yet, be sure to let them know I sent you. After you place your order, select The Newsworthy in the survey and select my show in the drop-down menu that follows. Okay, now back to our conversation. Let's talk about those RSV vaccines and antibody treatments that you briefly brought up. I know there was some confusion last year when they first came out because these are fairly new. So break it down for us. Who should be getting these and how effective are they?
So there's really three groups that need and can get an RSV protection. One is older adults. Certainly those over 75, those over 60 can get it as well. And again, this is not an annual vaccine. They really just need one because that protection is very durable and it works very well. Second group is pregnant, among those that are pregnant. This is important because if you get it during your pregnancy in the last trimester, so 32 to 36 weeks, that protection passes to the baby for the first 6 months of life. And it's incredibly effective, about 82% effective in preventing hospitalization for that little one in the first couple months of life. And then the third option for those with the mom that didn't get the vaccine during pregnancy, newborns can get, it's called a monoclonal antibody. So this isn't a vaccine. So it doesn't teach our body how to make antibodies, but rather it's preventative medication. It directly provides antibodies to infants under 8 months old. And it worked incredibly well. The real world study from last season was an upwards of 96% effective of preventing hospitalization for babies.
Are you seeing that some older kids can get it?
Yeah, so high-risk kids can get the monoclonal antibody. So that means over 8 months. And the reason for that is because they need additional protection during RSV season, especially if they have asthma or breathing problems. That RSV is just not a fun thing to have. I think the biggest challenge with RSV monoclonal antibodies last season, and we'll see if it's better this season, is supply. And so pediatricians are, at least last season, were really hyper-focused on the highest risk that need that, like premature babies or those with underlying health conditions.
Back to flu and COVID, the rules have changed specifically for COVID over the years. And, in the past, because we are in back to school season, some schools had required kids to stay home for 10 days after a positive test, similar to adults, no matter what. That, of course, has changed. What should the policy be now for keeping kids home from school or even testing them for COVID if it's coming across as just a cold?
The biggest rule I have for my kids is if they have a fever, they stay home. And even if they have a fever for, 24 hours after a fever. Because usually, especially with the flu, a fever is a really good correlate on how infectious they are. But you're right, sometimes they don't have a fever, especially a lot of kids with COVID. It's a mild cold to a lot of them. As an epidemiologist, I do test them for COVID-19, not because I'm necessarily concerned about them, but because my kids have older teachers and I want to try to be a good community member. And so with that, that does mean I keep them out of school without COVID until that test turns negative. But other than that, I mean, you don't really need to know what virus is really driving those symptoms because it really doesn't change what we do as parents.
And any specific advice for parents when it comes to the COVID vaccine? Because, I think a lot of people feel that, as you said, COVID is often mild in kids. So do they really need it?
It comes down to the objective of why you're getting that vaccine, right? So there are secondary benefits to COVID-19 vaccines, and that is prevention of infection, even if it's imperfect and even if it's for a small window. The other thing that the vaccine can help is even if they get sick, it helps clear the virus faster so they can go back to school.
Before we wrap up, I'm curious your take. The WHO has now authorized an Mpox vaccine due to the outbreak in Africa. Is there a threat of Mpox spreading to the U.S.? What are you watching when it comes to this?
So Mpox was also called monkeypox. We changed the name. It is still circulating. So there's one type that is still circulating in the United States. It looks like it's going to be endemic in the United States, particularly among men who have sex with men. And they can that specific at-risk group can get the vaccine. You mentioned, though, a massive outbreak happening in Central Africa right now, and that's with a different strain. And what's concerning there is that it's among children, and the children are the ones that are ending up in the hospital and dying at the highest rate. The reason, though, that's happening out there is because mainly what's driving that is exposure to wild animals, that they're catching squirrels and then eating them and having that direct contact. I am very concerned about what's happening in Central Africa. I do not foresee this being a massive emergency in the United States. I think all of our focus at the policy level needs to be how are we supporting African countries, and they need vaccines, they need technical expertise and help, and they need resources.
Final thought on COVID and flu vaccines.
Get your vaccines. It's the best thing you can do to protect yourselves this fall.
Well, thank you to Dr. Caitlin Jetelina for sharing her expertise with us. You can get many more insights from her by signing up for her newsletter. Go to yourlocalepidemiologist.substack.com. Thank you for listening today. Stay up to date with all the news to know each weekday with our 10-minute roundups every Monday through Friday. You can follow us in your favorite podcast app for free so you never miss an episode. We'll be back on Monday. Until then, have a great weekend.